Welcome to the Muscle Building Mastery Podcast, where guys that want to build muscle come to learn how to do it properly. We understand that there's more to building muscle than mindlessly throwing weights around and chugging mass gainer shakes. We're not interested in quick fixes or anabolic assistance. We're interested in mastering the art, science and skill set required to stack on real muscle and strength. My name's Andy Clements, and for the last 12 years I've devoted my life to figuring out how guys like us who don't have amazing genetics, don't have 5 hours a day to spend in the gym, and don't want to take steroids as a shortcut can build insane amounts of muscle and strength in weeks and months, not years and decades. This podcast is the result of all the lessons I've learned along the way, and it will give you the blueprint to building more muscle in less time. To get you started, head to www.musclebuildingmastery.net to download your free 6-week workout plan. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Muscle Building Mastery Podcast. My name's Andy Clements, and in this episode we're going to talk about my top 3 tips for cutting, and in particular cutting body fat is what I'm talking about there. So in the last episode we talked about my top 3 tips for bulking, and that's putting on size. Now we're going to talk about how to shred down the body fat, okay? So I've got 3 really important tips that if you implement these tips into your dieting phase, into your cutting phase, I can nearly, as near as I can possibly do, if you follow these advice, I can guarantee that you will see a marked improvement in your dropping body fat and you're retaining and even building muscle mass in your cutting phase. Does that sound good? Okay, cool. So without further ado, I'm going to get straight in to the 3 tips. So the first tip that I've got for you is to keep your calories as high as possible for as long as possible, right? Now this is a little bit backward, because when we think about cutting, we often think about just getting rid of food, right? And just starting to almost starve ourselves into submission, starve our body into dropping the body fat, right? But that's completely the wrong way to go about it. And I completely understand that way of thinking, because that's the way I used to think as well, right? Because I used to go from this mindset of bulking, which I spoke about in the last episode. I was just like ramming food in and just absolutely smashing as much food as I could possibly fit in my mouth at one time in, so I could grow. I used to switch to the complete polar opposite of that, which was completely living on bird feed. Basically, I was like living on meat and veg and fish and stuff like that, and getting rid of the fats, getting rid of the carbs, and just like protein and veg. And I was just dying for so long, and I can remember quite often I would start a diet, and in the first week of the diet, because I so dramatically changed my diet, my food intake so dramatically, I would lose like 10 pounds in the first week, right? 10 pounds in the first week. Can you imagine that? Like that might sound to some people like it's good because you're losing the weight and you want to lose the weight, but it's not good, because you're going to be losing, like, you're not going to lose 10 pounds of fat in a week. You're going to lose 10 pounds of a bit of fat, a lot of muscle, a lot of water, a lot of glycogen, and a lot of things that you need to keep on board for as long as possible, to help you retain muscle mass and actually have a physique at the end of your diet, right? Because you don't just want to diet all the muscle that you've just spent 6 months, 8 months, a year, whatever it was, building in your bulking phase, right? So that's what I used to do, that's where I used to be, and as a result my strength would plummet, because I'd drop my calories so low so quickly. My strength would plummet, my muscle mass would just be lost, all the hard work of my bulking phase would be completely wasted, and I would just be left deflated and frustrated and just a bit like disheartened that I'd gone from this strong but admittedly a little bit fat version of myself to this kind of like skinny guy again, that couldn't lift anywhere near what he could lift just a few weeks earlier. And I was just like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong here. So I remember around that time I was getting into, I was still learning about muscle building and stuff, but I also getting into like a little bit like personal development and stuff. And there's a guy in the personal development space, in the entrepreneurial space, called Tim Ferriss, right? And if you heard Tim Ferriss, he wrote a book called The 4-Hour Work Week. That's probably what he's most well known for. He's got all sorts of books out and podcasts and stuff like that. And I was listening to his podcast one day and I heard him talking about, this is a solo show he was doing on his own, I heard him talking about something called the minimum effective dose. And this is something that I've never heard anybody else talk about but Tim Ferriss, and I thought it's just such a cool concept, right? There's a minimum effective dose is what he was talking about is, if you can use, in any area of your life, the minimum amount of something to get the maximum amount of results, you're on the right track. And I was like, whoa, like that completely changes things in terms of like so many things in my life, but especially in terms of dieting, because my attitude to dieting, like I've just said, was just go gung-ho from the start and just like get rid of all the food, right, and just live on bird food for as long as possible. So I had the thought, like, what if I could use that philosophy or that methodology or that idea of the minimum effective dose to develop my body, like to develop my body both in a muscle building sense but also in a fat loss sense, in a cutting sense. So I thought, what if I keep my calories as high as possible for as long as possible and then only cut them when my progress stalled and just use the minimum effective dose of cutting calories, right? So I would, go from my off season or my bulking phase, where I might be on, let's just say 3,200 calories. It just doesn't matter, whatever. I was on 3,200 calories, right? And I would then maybe go into, and I was maintaining weight at that, I would then maybe go into my diet phase at 3,100 calories. Because that's the minimum effective dose, and as a result I would start to see my weight start to trickle down slowly because I was feeding my body less than it was used to, so my weight would start to adjust, right? But it would give my body time to adjust as well. It would give my body time to adjust to the new calories without having to offboard all the muscle mass and all the excess tissue that I'd worked so hard to accumulate, because it wasn't being fed enough to maintain that tissue. So I was still feeding it a decent amount to maintain the tissue, but now it had time to adjust and start to drop down weight in terms of fat weight, okay? So, I'm not saying every bit of the weight I lost was fat, but I think a big portion of the weight I was losing was body fat, and that was reflected in the results I got at the end of the diet. And so I lost way more fat than I did when I was losing 10 pounds in the first week, and I was only losing 1 pound or maybe 2 pounds in the first week, and I held on to way more muscle, even though I was losing less weight. So that was a really, really cool thing, and that sums up the first tip that I've got for you. My 3 tips of cutting, of how to do a cutting diet properly, is to keep your calories as high as possible for as long as possible and use the minimum effective dose. Now the second tip that I've got for you kind of leads on from that, and it's kind of like I came across the same realization at the same sort of time, and that is to save your tools for the right time in your diet. Now that might not make a lot of sense. It might sound like a little bit of an abstract thing, but let me explain what I mean. So around the same time that I was being like trigger happy with cutting the calories and getting rid of all the food out of my diet, right? I was also adding in, I went from doing no cardio whatsoever in the off season to doing cardio every day and doing like 10,000 steps a day, from doing 5,000 steps a day or 3,000 or whatever, or just whatever I could be able to do in the off season or the bulking phase. I would then go into my diet and not only cut the calories right down, but I would start doing cardio like 2-3 hours a day. I would start doing 10,000 steps a day. I would start adding in supplements. I would start doing all the things that I could think of to help me lose body fat in the quickest time possible. Because I was in the mindset, I was like, I want a 6-pack, I want a 6-pack, I want a 6-pack, right? And I added everything I could possibly think of in from day one, right? And like I said previously, as a result of that, as a result of the combination of cutting calories as fast as possible, and as a result of the combination of adding the cardio in and all the different things I could think of in to lose weight as fast as possible, my weight loss rapidly dropped, and my strength drops, and my muscle mass dropped, and everything dropped, right? So, even if you're happy with that, even if you're happy with rapid weight loss, once I'd lost maybe a stone, maybe 15, 16 pounds, or whatever it was, and once I'd lost a certain amount, my body had sort of caught up with itself, and it had reached the state of homeostasis or balance, and my weight loss had stalled, but I still wanted to carry on losing fat because I still had fat on my body, I had nowhere to go. I had nowhere else to go. I had nowhere else to turn. I was already doing the 2 hours of cardio a day. I was already cutting as much food as I possibly could out of my diet without literally starving myself. I was already adding all the different supplements in. I was already doing the 10 to 15,000 steps a day. You know, I was dedicating my whole life to this diet, and I had nowhere else to turn, nowhere else to go when my weight loss stalled, right? And so that's when it came back to the epiphany that I had, that I told you about before, which was the minimum effective dose, right? I wasn't applying the minimum effective dose. The minimum effective dose would have been to save all these different tools that I was just dumping at my body in this like the day one of the diet, and it would have been to save them up and to use them strategically at the right time, right? So the new philosophy that I ended up coming up with out of this idea of the minimum effective dose from Tim Ferriss, and you know, combining it with all the things that I'd learned from my experience of trying cutting diets in the past, was to get the most amount of results for the least amount of work. Does that make sense? Get the most amount of results for the least amount of work. That's what I'm all about. That's what I used to teach my clients. That's what I learned for myself, and that is the philosophy that saw me through a lot of successful diets. It saw my clients through a lot of successful diets, and it helped us to sustain that improved body composition, that improved physique, for as long as we wanted to carry on training. Wouldn't that be cool if you could sustain that amazing physique for as long as you want to carry on training? You wouldn't have to go through the peaks in body fat when you're bulking, in those crashes in muscle mass when you're cutting. You could just maintain an amazing level of body composition throughout, and bulk and get a bit bigger, and cut and get a bit leaner, but you know, you stay within an amazing range of body composition. That's what happened, and it changed the game for me with fat loss, and I got in the best shape ever. And you know, things really started to change for the better. Now let me explain exactly what I mean just by saving your tools for the right time. So let me give you an example. So the example before, I was talking about, you know, in the off season I might have been having 3,200 calories a day, right? And I might cut them down to 3,100 and see that fat loss trickle down a little bit. Then, you know, I might lose 2-3 pounds for a couple of weeks, and then it might stall. You know, my body might adapt to that 3,100, and my body might be like, right, cool, I understand what's going on. This is the food we're having. I can maintain my weight at this. What I would prefer to do at that point, instead of cutting calories and because I like my food, right? I don't like to feel like I'm hungry. I like to enjoy my food. I like to have as much food as possible. So you can make of that what you will. But what I like to do at that point is, instead of cutting calories further and risking being hungry, risking being grumpy, risking being tired, risking losing muscle mass, what I like to do is I like to add one of the extra tools. So carry on keeping my calories as high as possible and add one of the extra tools, whether that's, you know, I might start with steps. So I might start from going like, you know, whatever I was doing before, 5,000-6,000 steps a day, which you can just track using your phone. So everyone's got a phone, or most people have a phone, and you can track your steps just on your smartphone most of the time, on your iPhone, your Samsung, whatever you've got. You know, I might go from the full 5,000 steps I was doing in my off season to a 10,000 step count a day in my cutting phase, and that will probably be enough to get another 1 or 2 pounds a day off. And then when that stalls, I might add in 1 cardio session a week, you know, and then, you know, when that stalls, it's 2 cardio sessions a week, and when that stalls, it's 3 cardio sessions a week, and then so on and so on and so on. And you can end up getting 10 or 12 weeks of fat loss, consistent, predictable fat loss of, you know, 10, 15, 20 pounds without taking your calories below 3,100. Crazy, right? It's absolutely crazy. So that's how I approach things. And then when I've finally utilized all of those things, and I've lost a ton of fat, and I'm starting to see my abs, and I'm starting to see my muscular separation, I'm starting to see all these things, and things are starting to line up, and then it stalls, then I can start to bring my calories down strategically, and I can start to drop my calories down to 3,000 and then see what happens then, and then drop my calories down to 2,900 and see what happens then. But I don't go anymore. I don't throw everything in the cutting diet arsenal from day one, because that is the recipe to diet all your muscle off and then stall and have nowhere else to go. Right? Does that make sense? So that's my first two. And if you just employ them first two tips, that will completely revolutionize the way you look at diets and the way you look at cutting diets, how much muscle you hold on to, and how quick and how predictably you can lose body fat and you can keep it off. So they're the first two tips. The third tip is more to do with how can you retain as much muscle mass as possible while you're doing a cutting diet, right? Because when I figured this stuff out, I could predictably lose body fat and I could get in amazing shape. I could be absolutely shredded, like my veins would be popping out, my abs would be, ripped, my muscular separation would be coming through, all these different things would be happening. But I wasn't happy that my muscle mass was reducing and the efforts from my bulking phases weren't as good as and as sustainable as I would like them to be, and my strength will be coming down and all this sort of things, right? So the third tip I've got for you is to keep your strength as high as possible for as long as physically possible. And I'm actually going to say as long as mentally possible, because I honestly think when we start dieting, if we do dieting the right way, if we do dieting in the way that I have just laid out in those first two tips, right? Where you're doing it sensibly, you're doing it intelligently, you're doing it strategically, you're bringing things down in the calorie front at strategic times, you're bringing things up on the cardio and the exercise front or at strategic times as well. When you are utilizing all those tools at the right times, you shouldn't experience a drop in strength for a very long time. If you experience a drop in strength, it's a mental game, not a physical one. And let me explain why. I used to use dieting even after I'd figured the game out, even after I'd employed them first two tips that I've just told you about there. I used to use this concept of dieting and this mindset shift from bulking and putting on size to cutting and losing body fat. I used to use that as an excuse for feeling tired, feeling lethargic, losing motivation for the gym. I used to use it as an excuse for allowing my strength to slip, right? I used to not even attempt the same weights I could do just 2, 3 or 4 weeks previous when I was in my off-season phase or bulking phase. And as a result, guess what happened? I lost muscle mass, I lost strength, I lost density, I lost I lost what I could have had in terms of a physique at the end of the diet. Right? And I got a good physique, but I didn't get an amazing physique at the end of the diet, right? I got lean, but I wasn't, as muscular as I could be. And therefore, what the hell was the bulking phase for? What were you putting that muscle mass on for if you're not going to fight to keep it, right? That's where I was at. And so, my muscle wasted way more than if I'd have just fought hard every session to keep that strength. I just got myself in the right mindset before I went in for every single workout and pushed and pushed and pushed. And so what I ended up doing was I was like, the last few times I've done a cutting diet, before I've started it, I've been like, right, I am not going to lose strength for at least the first 6 weeks. I told myself that the first 6 weeks, my calories are still going to be high. So there is no excuse whatsoever for losing strength. And as a result of that mental shift, right, my mental shift in my perception, my mental shift in my attitude to my diet, what happened was incredible. What happened was I didn't only not lose strength in the first 6 weeks of that diet, but I actually put strength on, right? I can remember doing leg presses and actually having like 2 plates a side higher than when I started the diet 6 weeks in. I was pushing up in strength because I got my head sorted and I was still eating relatively close to what I was eating when I was in my off season, right? And so there was no excuse for me to lose strength. The only difference I was having is that maybe I was slightly lower, I was in a slight caloric deficit, and I was slightly higher with my energy output because I was doing a little bit more in the gym, I was doing more steps, I was doing, a cardio session a week or whatever I was doing at the time. But I was actually building strength. And now there comes a time when you get to the end of your diet where you're going to be coming down in weight and down in weight and down in weight. And there comes a time that you will find that you can't build strength anymore and you might start to slip. But that's a physical time when you slip, not a mental time, okay? And you fight as hard as you can for as long as you possibly can to maintain the strength and if possible build the strength to keep the muscle mass on. as you're dieting down. And that's the real key. That's the real key to have an incredible physique at the end of your diet phase, instead of just looking lean but not actually looking that muscular. So that's what I've figured out over the last few years of trying diets and trying bulking phases and cutting phases and just bouncing between the two all the time. That's how I've figured out how to run a cutting phase. If you want to figure out how to learn a bulking phase, that was on the previous episode number 31 of the Muscle Building Mastery podcast, called My Top 3 Tips for Bulking. So you can scroll down your podcast app, or you can go through my YouTube channel and have a look for that one. But for cutting phases, implement those 3 tips. Seriously, go back and watch this again, listen to this again if you need to, and implement those first 3 tips, and you will see much better results in your cutting phase diets, your fat loss phase diets, than you ever have before. So I hope that was useful. I hope you enjoyed that. If you want to get started on a workout program that will work for either your bulking phases or your cutting phases, because the training isn't that different for either one, it's just your approach to those things that I've spoke about in these podcasts. So if you want to get started on a workout program that will help you build muscle, or maintain, retain, and still build muscle on your bulking phase or your cutting phase, go to www.musclebuildingmastery.net now to download your free 6-week workout program that will take you from the beginner stage all the way through to the muscle building master stage in a really simple 3-step process where I layer on more advanced workouts each week. So that's what I'm really excited about. I hope you go and download your free plan now to musclebuildingmastery.net, and I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you over there in the next one. If you're ready to stop wasting time in the gym and start mastering the skill of muscle building, go check out www.musclebuildingmastery.net to download your free 6-week muscle building workout plan. I have specifically formulated this workout plan to take you through the 3 stages of mastering your body, layering on a more advanced training methodology each week as you progress. That means that regardless of where you are with your training right now, this plan will push you forward and help you stack on more muscle and strength in just 6 weeks. So head to www.musclebuildingmastery.net now to grab your free 6-week workout plan.